Psalm 91 is often recited in times of trouble, a go-to scripture for comfort, assurance, and divine protection. Many know the words by heart. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. It's a passage that offers a sense of safety, a promise of refuge, and peace in the face of danger. But here's the question. Do we truly understand the depth of what these words mean? Have we ever stopped to think about what is really being promised to us in this psalm? We often think of Psalm 91 as a shield, a barrier that keeps us safe from harm. We hear about God's protection and comfort, and it's easy to cling to these promises when life gets tough. But there's a much deeper meaning woven into this psalm that most of us miss. Psalm 91 is not just about protection from physical danger. It's about something far more profound. It's a call to a lifestyle of total trust and submission to God's will. It's about dwelling in the presence of God in a way that transforms how we live, how we respond to fear, and how we experience God's power in our daily lives. What if I told you there's a hidden dimension to this psalm that could change the way you approach your life and your faith? What if the true power of Psalm 91 isn't just in the promises of protection, but in the deeper understanding of how we are called to live under God's authority and trust His sovereignty no matter what? In this video, we're going to uncover the hidden meaning behind Psalm 91. We'll go beyond the surface-level promises of safety and security and dive into the truth that many overlook. I want to take you on a journey where we explore the layers of this psalm that go beyond the comfort we often seek. We'll explore how God's protection is linked to His presence, His authority, and our willingness to submit to Him fully. This is not a simple psalm about being safe. It's about living in the fullness of God's plan for your life. Are you ready to take your understanding of Psalm 91 to the next level? Are you prepared to see it in a light you may have never considered before? Let's dive deep into the words of this psalm, unravel its true meaning, and discover how it speaks to our lives in ways that we've only just begun to grasp. Section 1, The Secret Place, a call to live in God's presence. Let me take you back to a time in your life when things were simpler. Maybe it was when you were younger, sitting by a quiet creek or under the shade of a big tree, feeling the warmth of the sun and the gentle breeze. It was a moment of peace, a time where you could just breathe and enjoy the stillness of life. It's that sense of safety, that hidden place of calm where nothing could touch you, where you could just be yourself. Now think of Psalm 91 where it says, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." At first glance, we often see this as just a promise of protection. It's something we hold on to when life feels uncertain, when troubles come knocking at our door. But let's pause for a moment and think about what it really means to dwell in the secret place of the Most High. You see, the word dwell here doesn't just mean visiting or stopping by. No, it means to settle, to remain, to make it your home. It's not a fleeting moment, but a continuous way of living. In the Old Testament, the secret place was the innermost part of the temple, the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest could enter to be in the direct presence of God. It was the most sacred, intimate space. And here, God is inviting you to dwell in that very presence, not just once in a while, but daily, continuously, making it a part of your life. Now, I want you to imagine a place where God's presence surrounds you, like a thick, peaceful cloud. You can't see it, but you feel it. You hear His voice, not audibly, but in the quiet moments of your heart. You feel His guidance, His comfort, His protection, as you sit there, safe and secure, under His care. This is what it means to dwell in the secret place. It's not a location on a map. It's an invitation to live every moment with God. And here's the deeper truth. The secret place isn't just a place where you seek refuge during tough times. It's a lifestyle of constant communion with God. It's about cultivating a relationship with Him that's so deep, so intimate, that His presence becomes a part of your daily life, in good times and bad. It's about setting aside moments, quiet moments, still moments where you allow yourself to be with Him, where the noise of the world fades away, and it's just you and God, finding peace in His presence. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly dwelled in God's presence? Without distraction, without worrying about what comes next or how things will turn out. It's a choice, a decision we make to create space for God in our lives. And this isn't just for a select few, it's for all of us. You don't need to be in a special place, in a temple or church, to dwell with God. You can do this wherever you are, whether you're sitting in your favorite chair, walking down the street, or lying in bed. The secret place is wherever you invite God to be with you. As we grow older, life can sometimes become more difficult. Our bodies slow down, the world feels different, and our memories might not be what they once were. But the beautiful thing is, God is always with us, always present, and always ready to welcome us into his secret place. He hasn't changed, and he promises that if we choose to dwell with him, we will experience his presence and his peace in ways that go beyond what we can comprehend. When we dwell in the secret place, we're not just seeking protection. We're seeking a deeper intimacy with our Creator. And when we make the decision to stay in that place, to live there, we are promised that we will be covered under the shadow of the Almighty. That is the first and most important promise in Psalm 91, that when we choose to dwell in God's presence, we are not alone. We are under his care, his guidance, and his protection. So Nest, my dear friend, I encourage you to think about the secret place. It's waiting for you, not as a place to escape to only in times of need, but as a refuge where you can live with God every single day. Would you choose to dwell there, not just for a season, but for the rest of your life? Section 2, Under the Shadow, Living Under God's Authority. Let me take you back for a moment, a little further in time, to a season when you may have felt the weight of responsibility on your shoulders, when the world seemed uncertain, and decisions seemed more important than ever. You may have been raising children, managing a home, or navigating through the twists and turns of life. During those times, you probably sought out someone wise, someone you trusted, someone whose authority you could lean on. Perhaps it was a parent, a mentor, or a friend, someone who had been through the storms and had the wisdom to help guide you. In Psalm 91, there's a powerful phrase that many of us pass over. You shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And while it may sound like a simple promise of protection, there's something profound here that I want to explore with you. When the psalmist talks about living under the shadow of the Almighty, it's not just about physical protection, it's about living under God's authority. To be under someone's shadow in biblical times was to be in their care, their protection, but also to submit to their rule. Think of a child who runs to their father, not only for safety, but also because they trust that their father knows what's best. The shadow was a symbol of shelter, but also a symbol of power and rule. It was a place where you were safe because the one in authority was watching over you. But here's something many of us miss. In order to truly be under God's shadow, we must be willing to submit to his authority. It's easy to think of God as the protector who shields us from harm, and indeed he does. But God's protection comes with a call to trust him fully, to place ourselves under his rule in all areas of life, not just when we're in need, but all the time. When we speak of the shadow of the Almighty, we're reminded of the power of God's authority in our lives. Think about the shadows we see every day, whether it's the shadow of a tree that provides comfort on a hot day, or the shadow of a strong figure that casts protection. In the same way, God's shadow is not passive. It is filled with the strength and authority that comes from his sovereignty. It's the kind of shadow that doesn't just offer refuge, but it also transforms the way we live. To be under his shadow means we trust his wisdom, his guidance, and his plan for our lives. Let's think back to a moment in your life when you needed guidance. Perhaps there was a season when you had to make a difficult decision, or a time when you faced an overwhelming challenge. Maybe it was during your younger years, when you sought guidance from someone you trusted, or perhaps even now, when you look for that sense of certainty amidst the uncertainties of life. In those times, we often lean on others' wisdom, but the deeper truth in Psalm 91 is that we are also invited to lean on God's wisdom. We are called to trust him not just for protection, but for direction. When we choose to live under God's shadow, we are choosing to live under his sovereign authority. This means trusting that he is in control, even when life doesn't make sense. It means understanding that God's ways are higher than ours, that his plans for us are better than our own plans. It means accepting that God's protection and provision are always linked to his righteous rule. But here's the key, especially for us in later years of life, God's shadow is not a burden, but a refuge. It's easy to think of authority as something restrictive, something that might limit our freedom. But God's authority is different. It is a shelter, not a cage. Just like the shadow of a tree on a hot day provides relief from the heat, God's shadow offers us relief from the worries and struggles of life. It doesn't bind us, it frees us to live in the peace that comes from knowing God is in control. Now, as you reflect on your life, I encourage you to think about how often you've allowed God's authority to guide you. Have you truly lived under his shadow, trusting in his leadership, especially when life became uncertain or challenging? Or have you sometimes tried to handle things on your own, stepping out from under that shadow, believing you could manage without his help? In our later years, it's easy to feel like we've been there, done that, like we've figured things out. But the truth is, no matter how much experience we have, God's authority is still the best place to rest. As we face new challenges, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, we are always invited to return to that place under his shadow, to live in the safety of his guidance, trusting that he knows what's best for us. So as we grow older, let's take this to heart. The shadow of the Almighty is not just a place of protection, it's a place of peace, direction, and trust. It's an invitation to submit to his authority with confidence, knowing that his rule over our lives brings only good things. When we live under his shadow, we're not only protected from harm, but we're also guided toward a life of fulfillment, peace, and trust in God's perfect will. So, my dear friends, I ask you today, are you living under God's shadow? Are you fully trusting in his authority, not just in times of trouble, but in every area of your life? Let's choose to abide under his shadow, today and every day, and experience the peace and safety that only his sovereignty can provide. Section 3, the promise of deliverance, finding freedom in God's care. Let me take you to a place where many of us have been, a place where fear seems to rule, where circumstances feel out of control, and where we long for rescue. Perhaps you faced a time in your life when everything seemed uncertain, when illness, financial strain, or even the loss of a loved one brought deep sorrow. Maybe you've stood at the edge of a difficult decision, uncertain of which way to turn, and longing for a clear sign of what to do next. In those moments, Psalm 91 offers us a profound promise of deliverance. It says, "Surely he shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. He shall cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you shall take refuge." Psalm 91, 3, 4. This promise speaks of deliverance from two powerful forces, the snare of the fowler and the perilous pestilence. Now, let's take a moment to think about what these terms truly mean, because they hold much more significance than we might first realize. The snare of the fowler refers to a trap, often one that is carefully laid and hidden, designed to catch its prey by surprise. It's a trap that the enemy sets, hoping to ensnare us in situations where we feel helpless. This could represent the unexpected hardships of life, times when we find ourselves in circumstances we didn't foresee and can't control. Maybe it's a financial crisis, a health scare, or even a sudden change in your life situation that leaves you feeling vulnerable. The snare isn't just a physical trap, it's the emotional and spiritual snare that causes us to panic, to feel trapped by our circumstances. The perilous pestilence, on the other hand, speaks to those unseen forces that threaten us, like illness, sickness, or any kind of affliction that seems to strike from out of nowhere. These are the things that come into our lives unexpectedly, bringing with them fear and uncertainty. It's the kind of threat that we can't always see coming and can't easily avoid. It's the sickness that suddenly arrives in your body, the accident that strikes when you least expect it, the crisis that leaves you breathless with worry. But here's where the power of God's promise comes in. Psalm 91 doesn't just speak of these dangers, it promises deliverance from them. And this deliverance doesn't come from our own strength or ability to navigate life's hardships. It comes from God's protection and his loving care. Notice how the psalmist continues, "He shall cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you shall take refuge." This is a beautiful and tender picture of God's care for his people. In the natural world, a mother bird spreads her wings to cover her young, protecting them from the dangers around them. When the storm comes, the young birds huddle beneath the protection of their mother's wings, safe from harm. In the same way, God invites us to take refuge under his wings, to find comfort and security in his care. But here's the deeper truth. God's deliverance is not just about being saved from the dangers we can see. It's about finding peace in the midst of those dangers. Knowing that even when life feels overwhelming, God is covering us with his protection. Sometimes deliverance doesn't look like an immediate removal from hardship, but a peaceful assurance in the storm. A quiet confidence that no matter what comes, we are never alone. God doesn't promise to remove all our struggles, but he promises to cover us, to keep us safe, to hold us close in his care. For those of us who have lived many years, we know that life doesn't always follow the path we expect. There are times when we face hardships that seem impossible to overcome, when the world around us feels uncertain and full of fear. But what Psalm 91 reminds us is that no matter what happens, we have a place of refuge. That place is not a far-off location. It is God himself, covering us with his feathers, sheltering us with his wings. Think back on the times in your life when God has delivered you, perhaps not in the way you expected, but in the way you needed most. Maybe there was a time when you didn't know how you would get through a trial, but somehow you did. Or perhaps there was a moment when, despite your fears, you felt God's peace surround you, even in the midst of your struggle. Those moments of deliverance are God's wings spread wide over you, offering you comfort and protection. In our later years, we may face new challenges, physical ailments, the loss of loved ones, or the uncertainty of what the future holds. But Psalm 91 reminds us that no matter what happens, God is with us. He promises to deliver us from the snares and pestilences of life, not necessarily by removing them, but by providing us with a refuge so secure that we can rest, knowing he is in control. Deliverance is not always an escape from the storm. It is the assurance that we are never left to face it alone. God's wings are always ready to cover us, to shelter us, and to bring us peace. So, my friends, in these later seasons of life, when fear sometimes creeps in and the unknown looms before us, let us remember the promise of Psalm 91. God's deliverance is not a distant hope. It is a present reality. We are safe under his wings, and his protection is always available to us. Let us trust in his loving care and find refuge in the peace he offers, knowing that we are always covered by his divine protection. Section 4. Fear not. Living with courage under God's protection. Imagine for a moment that you're walking through a dark forest. The trees tower above you, their branches twisting into shapes that seem to stretch toward the sky like arms reaching out. The path before you is narrow, and the wind howls through the branches, creating shadows that dance on the ground. You know that something dangerous could be lurking just beyond your sight. Maybe it's an animal or a person with bad intentions, or perhaps it's just the fear of the unknown that grips you most tightly. But as you walk, you remember something important: you are not alone. You remember that, though the path is dark and the journey uncertain, there is someone by your side, guiding you, protecting you. This picture of walking in fear, where uncertainty seems to surround you at every turn, is something many of us can relate to, especially as we grow older. Life has its uncertainties. There are moments when we feel vulnerable, whether it's the fear of illness, loss, or the feeling of not being in control anymore. These fears, much like the shadows in the forest, can seem overwhelming and even paralyzing. And yet, Psalm 91 speaks directly to this fear, offering us a promise that we can cling to in times of uncertainty. The psalm begins with the beautiful declaration, "You shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor of the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor of the destruction that lays waste at noonday." Psalm 91, 5, chapter 6. These words were not just meant for the people of ancient Israel. They're meant for you and me today. They speak to the very fears that so often keep us awake at night, fears of the unknown, fears of harm, and fears that things will go wrong when we least expect them. But here's the powerful truth behind these words. The promise is not just that fear will disappear, but that we do not have to let fear control us. The psalmist isn't saying that no fear will ever come our way. Instead, he is saying that in the face of fear, we have the choice to trust in God's protection. Fear is a natural part of life. It's part of being human. But what we do with that fear is where the promise lies. When you think about your own life, what are the fears that have kept you up at night? Maybe it's the fear of losing your health, your independence, or your loved ones. Perhaps it's the fear of financial strain or the uncertainty of what the future holds. These fears are real, and yet Psalm 91 calls us to something greater than simply managing those fears. It calls us to trust in God's protection in the midst of them. Let me tell you a story. There was a time, many years ago, when a dear friend of mine, someone much like you, faced a serious health scare. They were in their 70s, and the doctors had told them that there was a significant problem with their heart. The fear was overwhelming. The uncertainty of not knowing what would happen next was almost too much to bear. They lay awake at night, praying, asking God for peace, for protection. But in the midst of that fear, something beautiful happened. They remembered the words of Psalm 91, "You shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day." They realized that while the fear was real, they didn't have to face it alone. God was with them. The shadow of the Almighty was covering them, even in the uncertainty. And with that, they found peace not in the absence of fear, but in the presence of God's protection. They could sleep again, knowing that no matter the outcome, they were safe in His care. In the same way, Psalm 91 invites each of us to lay down our fears at God's feet. It's not about pretending that fear doesn't exist, or that we won't feel afraid at times. It's about choosing to trust that, in every fear, in every moment of uncertainty, God's protection surrounds us like a shield. We are never alone in the dark forest. He walks beside us. The psalm goes on to say, "1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you." Psalm 91:7, this verse speaks of the reality of danger. It acknowledges that we live in a broken world, where harm and hardship come to many, but it also declares that God's protection will guard us in the midst of it all. It's a bold promise, though others may face trials. Though others may fall, God will keep us safe. This doesn't mean that we won't face hardship, but it means that God's presence will be with us through it. It means that in the midst of loss, or illness, or any other trial, we are under His wings of protection. And even when the world seems full of destruction and despair, we have the promise of His covering. For those of us who have lived many years, we know this truth better than most. Life is unpredictable, and there are many things beyond our control. But this promise, this deep, abiding truth is something that we can hold on to with both hands. We do not have to fear. We can choose courage, not because the fear isn't real, but because God's protection is greater. I want to leave you with this thought in your later years. When the unknowns of life can seem overwhelming, remember that you have a choice. Fear will come. It always does. But you don't have to let it rule your life. Instead, choose to live under the shelter of God's wings. Choose to trust in His protection. Choose to step forward in courage, knowing that He is with you, with God as your refuge. No fear, no matter how real, can overtake you. So, my dear friend, as you face the challenges of today and the fears of tomorrow, I encourage you to rest in the peace that comes from Psalm 91. Remember that, no matter the terror or the uncertainty, you do not have to walk through it alone. God's protection is greater, and His presence is constant. Take heart and fear not. Section 5, Divine Justice and the Thousand Fall. Trusting God's righteousness in our lives. I want to take you back for a moment to a time when you may have witnessed an event or experienced a moment that seemed unfair. A moment when it felt like the world wasn't treating you right. Maybe it was a situation where you worked hard, did everything the right way, and yet you watched as someone who seemed to have no regard for righteousness succeeded while you struggled. Or perhaps you've seen a loved one suffer a hardship that didn't seem to match the kindness and goodness they had shown in their lives. In those moments, it's easy to feel as though life is unfair, that justice is elusive, and that the righteous suffer while the wicked seem to flourish. Psalm 91 speaks to this very thing. It says, "1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you." Psalm 91:7. When I read this verse, I think about the many times in life when we see others facing hardship, even destruction, while we are somehow spared. This promise of Psalm 91 goes beyond physical protection. It speaks of divine justice. God promises that although destruction and calamity may befall others, his protection will cover those who trust in him, those who are living under his shadow. But let's pause and reflect on what this really means. 1,000 may fall at your side. This isn't just a poetic expression. It acknowledges that harm and suffering are real, that we are living in a world where things often don't go the way we expect or want. It reminds us that we are not immune to the struggles and tragedies of life. And yet, there's a promise that God's protection will remain with us, that we will not be touched by the same fate that befalls others. This verse is also a reminder that God's protection is tied to his justice. It's not just about us being safe from harm, it's about God's righteousness at work in our lives. When we live under God's protection, we are living in alignment with his will, trusting in his ways, and walking in his righteousness. And because of that, we are promised that no matter how the world around us seems to fall apart, God will keep us safe in the shelter of his care. Let me share a story with you, one that may resonate with you, especially as we look back on the many years of life we've lived. There was an elderly woman, a dear friend of mine, who went through a very difficult period in her life. She had spent years working faithfully, giving of herself to others, raising her children with love and care, and doing everything she could to live a righteous life. But when she reached her later years, she found herself alone, struggling with health issues, and surrounded by people who seemed indifferent to her pain. She watched as others around her, who had not lived such virtuous lives, seemed to prosper, and it left her feeling disheartened. But in her moments of deepest despair, she remembered the words of Psalm 91, "1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you." She took these words not as a simple promise of physical protection, but as a reminder that, even though life may seem unjust at times, God was still in control. She knew that God's justice would prevail, and that though she faced trials, her faithfulness would be rewarded in ways that were beyond what she could see in the present. Over time, she began to find peace in knowing that God's protection and justice were not just about what she could see with her eyes, but about trusting that, no matter what happened, God was with her, and he was working things out for her good. She didn't need to understand all the whys or hows. She simply needed to trust in God's righteousness. And as she did, she found peace, even in the midst of the storms of life. Now, I know many of you may have faced similar struggles, or at least have watched others walk through the seasons of difficulty. And it's in these seasons that the question often arises, why? Why does it seem like others are spared while I struggle? Why does it seem like the unrighteous prosper while the righteous suffer? Psalm 91 doesn't answer all of these questions, but it reminds us that God's protection and justice are not always immediately visible in the ways we expect. We may not see the full picture now, but we can trust that God is sovereign, and that in his righteousness, he will bring about his perfect justice. For those of us in our later years who have seen so much of life and have experienced both triumphs and tragedies, this is an important truth to hold on to. We may not have the power to change our circumstances or control the injustices of the world, but we can trust that God's justice is always at work, even when we don't understand it. His protection is not just about keeping us safe in the moment. It's about his larger plan of righteousness, where he works all things for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. The promise of Psalm 91 is that even when we see others falling or facing destruction, God will keep us safe under his wings. This is not just about physical protection, but about knowing that in his time, he will bring justice to the world, and we can rest in that. Our job is to continue to trust, continue to walk in righteousness, and continue to live under the shadow of the Almighty. So, dear friend, as you reflect on the many years you've lived, and perhaps the challenges you've faced, Remember this promise: God's justice is greater than anything we can see with our eyes. Even when the world seems unfair, even when it feels like others are prospering at our expense, God's protection and justice will keep us safe. We may not understand it all, but we can trust that He is at work, bringing about His perfect plan, and in that, we find our peace. Section 6. His angels shall protect you, the unseen helpers in our journey. As I sit here with you today, I think about all the moments in life when we needed help, when we were at a crossroads or in the midst of a storm, and it felt like there was no one around to guide us. Maybe you faced a time when you were at your wit's end, unsure how to move forward, and yet somehow you made it through. You might have thought it was just a stroke of luck, or maybe the right person showed up at just the right time. But what if I told you that in those very moments, there was something greater at work, something unseen, something divinely appointed? Psalm 91 speaks to this very reality, offering us a promise that we don't always think about. For He shall give His angels charge over you, to keep you in all your ways. In their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. Psalm 91, 11-12. Angels. How often do we think about them in our daily lives? They're there, watching over us, protecting us, guiding us. And yet, we often forget their presence. But the Bible tells us something profound in this passage. God has sent His angels to watch over us, to bear us up in times of trouble, and to protect us from harm, both seen and unseen. I want to take you back for a moment to a time when I was much younger, a time when I didn't fully understand the significance of God's protection, but one that has stayed with me for years. It was during a trip out of town, and I was driving late at night, feeling exhausted from the long day. The road was dark, and I was alone, just trying to get to my destination. The night was quiet, but there was something unsettling about the stillness. I remember feeling a slight unease, and as I made my way down a winding stretch of highway, my eyes began to grow heavy. Suddenly, I noticed the headlights of another car coming toward me, and in that moment, I realized I was veering too far over into the lane. I was too tired to fully focus, and for a split second, I knew there was danger ahead. But in that very moment, something strange happened. I felt a jolt of energy, as if a force was suddenly urging me to correct my steering, to move back to my lane. I didn't even have time to think. It was as though something invisible guided me, saving me from what could have been a disastrous crash. I never saw anyone, and there were no other cars around to help, but I couldn't shake the feeling that God had sent an angel in that moment, an unseen hand guiding me back to safety. I could have easily been lost that night, but God's protection was at work, even when I wasn't aware of it. That experience, though simple, is a reminder of how God's angels are constantly at work around us. They don't always show themselves, and we often don't recognize them, but they are there. It's sent by God to protect us from harm and guide us through our journey. This promise in Psalm 91 is not just comforting, it's a call to recognize the spiritual protection we have, even in the smallest details of our lives. The angels of God are sent to keep you in all your ways. Notice that it doesn't say they will only intervene in the big, dramatic moments of life. No, it says all your ways, meaning in the daily, ordinary moments too. From the times when we're lost in thought, walking through our days without a second thought, to those times when danger seems imminent, God's angels are watching over us, carrying us through even the smallest obstacles. As we grow older, we begin to realize just how fragile life can be. Our bodies aren't as strong as they once were, and the world around us seems to be moving faster than we can keep up. But the promise of Psalm 91 offers us something precious. God's angels are assigned to us, day and night, guiding us, protecting us, and bearing us up in times of need. Let me tell you another story that has stuck with me. A woman I know, someone with a heart full of faith, was going through a very difficult time. She had been diagnosed with a serious illness, and her family was scattered, each dealing with their own challenges. She felt alone and burdened. But one evening, as she was walking to her car in a parking lot, she suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of calm, a peace that filled her heart. She looked around, and to her surprise, there was no one in the parking lot. but she said she felt as though someone was right there beside her. It wasn't a person, but it was as though an invisible presence was comforting her, reminding her that she wasn't truly alone. She didn't see any angels, but she felt the undeniable presence of God's protection, watching over her every step. In that moment, she knew that God's angels were surrounding her, providing her with the strength and courage she needed to face another day. In our later years, we sometimes feel as though we've passed the time of needing protection. We've lived through so much, weathered the storms, and we think maybe we're beyond needing such help. But God's promise in Psalm 91 is not limited by age or circumstances. His angels are assigned to us for our entire lives, watching over us in every moment, guiding us in ways we cannot always see, and intervening in ways we will never fully understand until we reach heaven. So, the next time you face a challenge, or when life feels overwhelming, remember this. His angels are there. They are God's gift to you, sent to protect and care for you. You don't need to see them or understand them fully. You just need to trust in the promise that God has assigned them to watch over you. From the smallest details to the greatest trials, His angels are with you, lifting you up and guiding you on your journey. In your later years, when fear and uncertainty may come knocking, take comfort in knowing that God's protection is as close as His angels, surrounding you, ready to catch you, ready to guide you through each moment. And remember, though we may not always see them, God's angels are real, and they are a sign of His love, care, and eternal presence in our lives. Conclusion: living under God's protection, a lifetime of trust. As we sit here today, surrounded by the memories and experiences that make up our lives, I can't help but reflect on how much we've seen and lived through. We've watched seasons change, we've seen loved ones come and go, and we've witnessed the world transform in ways we never could have imagined. And through it all, there has been one constant: the faithfulness of God. Psalm 91 is not just a collection of comforting words to be recited in moments of crisis. It is a profound declaration of God's unchanging presence, His protection, and His care for us. It's a reminder that no matter the ups and downs of life, God is with us always. You see, the promise of Psalm 91 is not just for the young or for those just starting out on their journey. It is for all of us, no matter our age, no matter the trials we face, no matter the uncertainties of life. As we grow older, we may feel like we're walking through life with more questions than answers, more aches than triumphs, and more days behind us than ahead. But here's the beautiful truth. The same God who promised protection to His people thousands of years ago is the same God who watches over us today. Think about it. When we were younger, we were often too busy to slow down and notice the quiet blessings of God's protection. We were caught up in the hustle of life, running after dreams, raising families, building careers, and navigating the many twists and turns of the world. But now, in our later years, we have the gift of reflection, the ability to look back and see how God has carried us through it all. We've seen His hand at work in ways that might have been hard to recognize in the midst of the noise of life. Now we can look back and see the times He shielded us when we didn't even know danger was near. We can see the moments He gave us peace when fear tried to take hold. We can recognize how He has been with us, whether we were walking in light or stumbling through dark times. As we've discussed today, Psalm 91 doesn't promise a life without challenges. In fact, it acknowledges the reality of danger, fear, and even destruction in the world. But it also assures us that we are not alone in those moments. We are promised God's constant presence, His protection, His guidance, and His peace. Whether we're facing health challenges, dealing with loss, or simply growing older, we are assured that God is with us in every step of the journey. I remember a time in my life when I was facing a deep personal struggle, and I felt completely overwhelmed. It seemed like everything was going wrong, and there was no way out. But in the midst of that season, I found myself turning to Psalm 91, reciting the words again and again, reminding myself that I wasn't alone. And in those moments of prayer, I found something powerful: not an immediate change in my circumstances, but a deep sense of peace that settled over my heart. I knew that God was protecting me, that He was walking beside me, and that no matter what came, I could trust him. Now, as I look back on those days, I realized that the peace I found in that season wasn't just at a fleeting moment. It was the deep, unshakable knowledge that God's promises are true. His protection isn't just for a season of life, it's for all seasons. His angels are with us. His presence is constant, and his shadow is a refuge we can trust. No matter how old we get or how difficult life becomes, for those of us who are in the later years of life, this promise is especially sweet. We may feel like we've passed the time of needing to be protected or watched over, but Psalm 91 reminds us that God's protection is for a lifetime. His care doesn't expire when we reach a certain age. It is a lifelong promise. We are not forgotten, we are not overlooked, and we are not alone. I know that many of you have seen your share of struggles and heartaches. Life hasn't always been easy, and there have been moments when the road seemed too difficult to walk. But I want to encourage you today, don't forget the promises of Psalm 91. God's protection, his love, and his presence are as real today as they have ever been. He has been with you through every trial, and he will continue to be with you as you face whatever comes next. So, as you continue your journey, no matter how many years you have behind you or how many years may lie ahead, I encourage you to dwell in the secret place of the Most High. Trust in his protection, rest in his shadow, and remember that, just as he has carried you through every season of your life, he will continue to carry you. God's promises are not for a moment, they are for a lifetime. As we close, I invite you to take a moment to reflect on God's faithfulness in your life. Think about the ways he has protected you, guided you, and carried you. And remember that, no matter what the future holds, you are always under the wings of the Almighty, covered by his love and shielded by his mighty power. May you walk forward with peace, knowing that God's protection will never leave you. You are his, and he will never let you go.